Hello and welcome everyone. It's time for Books I've Read in 2023 Part 2. So if you haven't seen Part 1, go ahead and check that out in the description below. And we're just going to leave where we left off, and that is with a whole trilogy. This is the Broken Earth trilogy by N.K. Jemisin. It starts off with the 5th season, then goes to the Obelisk Gate, and last with the Stone Sky. And this is a series I really enjoyed, and I'm so glad that I read this. I'm so glad it actually pulled me in and resonated with me enough to keep reading it, because I'm just really glad that I did. So the thing with this book, these books, this trilogy, is that I really didn't like the characters. I didn't relate to them. I didn't connect with them. I didn't feel invested really in their lives. I felt kind of like, I don't really care what happens to them, to be honest, which I think was a bit of a saving grace, because this story is already really intense as it is. And if I felt super attached and connected to the characters, I think it would have been maybe too intense for me and I wouldn't have been able to read it. But because I felt so impartial, so detached, I was able to progress. The story itself, the world that Jemisin has created, is really engaging, very rich, very believable, very relatable. It feels like this could actually happen to our planet and to our culture and communities, and it was just really well written. The thing that I did feel connected to and really did actually enjoy was the relationships the characters had between each other. That I found really interesting and relatable, and the relationship that the characters had with the earth. I also found that to be really interesting, and those were the elements that kept me reading the book. Because if those didn't exist, I think just the way I felt about the characters, I probably wouldn't have continued to read. So anyways, in the end, really liked it, would definitely recommend it. It's listed as a sci-fi fantasy, and honestly, it didn't feel like a sci-fi until much later on in the book. I think one of the elements that makes it a sci-fi is that it's a future Earth, very far future Earth. And then a little bit later, because there's a lot of magic involved, but it's much later in the series that those more obvious sci-fi elements start to make themselves known. Because that story was still pretty intense after reading the three, I needed a little break. I needed something really comforting and familiar, and a book where I actually am invested in the characters and I do actually care about them and I do actually love them and want to hang out with them. And that is The Vanishing Type, which is a secret book and scone society novel by Ellery. It's a mystery. It's a cozy mystery. And this is, I think, the 5th one in the series. I've been reading them chronologically. And I've said this before, but when I first started reading the series, I was a little skeptical, felt like it wasn't my cup of tea, but now I'm really invested in these characters and I can't wait to read the next one. So if you're looking for just something really simple and cozy and sweet with characters that you want to just hang out with and have a cup of coffee and chat, then that would be a good one. Then I read a nonfiction called The Dead Duke, His Secret Wife, and the Missing Corpse, an extraordinary Edwardian case of deception and intrigue. That sounds like a really exciting, interesting story. Unfortunately, I found this book to be so boring. I hate having to say that about a book. I'm sad that I even forced myself to read it. I just read it because I had felt like I started it and I needed to finish it. I get a little stubborn about that sometimes in books, but I do feel like maybe I could have used my time better. Just reading a book for the sake of reading a book. I don't remember anything about it. The story did not land in my brain. It did not impact me in any meaningful way, which is really a bummer. And there's really silly part of me that wants to reread this book because I feel like I was missing something. Like, surely this book is more interesting than I'm giving it credit for. Maybe I just wasn't in the right headspace. But alas, I don't remember anything about it. I really just like read it and kind of zoned out, which is really unfortunate. I think I felt a lot of the time that the author went off on a tangent too often. Now, I love usually in nonfiction when you're following one particular story and the author gives you context for the world, and so that you have a better understanding of the daily lives and what's going on politically, environmentally, architecturally, and so on and so forth. That usually is a great enhancement to the story. This, I feel like, happened too much with things that I wasn't interested in, and the main story felt really thin, and like there just wasn't enough of it, and that's why the author had to like write about so many other things, because the main story was just, there wasn't much to it. That's my impression. Again, I feel bad for thinking so poorly, and it does feel like that was a me problem, not an author problem. Like maybe it went over my head or something. But anyways, then the next book is The Republic of Pirates, Being the True and Surprising Story of the Caribbean Pirates and the Man Who Brought Them Down by Colin Woodard. This is also a nonfiction. This is a book that Brian and I read together, and oh my gosh, love this book. This book felt so well researched and rich with actual evidence, texts from this time period. So it felt it was very straightforward, very, let me just tell you what happened based on these texts, but somehow in a way that was really engaging and really interesting. I think he did a really great job, to be honest. It's a really interesting subject, but to be able to tell the story in such an engaging way that really kept holding my interest and making me want to continue, while not having to fluff the actual facts or fluff the records that he's using to tell the story. There wasn't that element of, I don't know, I didn't feel like he took a lot of poetic license in writing this story. I feel like he was just very straightforward with, this is what this text said in 18 something, this is what this person wrote in a letter, but it was very engaging. So if you like pirates or you like history, this is a very fun one to read. Then I read The Historian. This is a hefty book and it took me some time to get through, but oh my gosh, I'm so glad I read this. I think out of all of the books that I've read in this part 2, this may be my favorite. I don't know. The trilogy did leave like its mark in my brain though. So it's hard to say. But this story was so rich with culture and rich with history. I really enjoyed the characters. They felt like real people, like I was following real people on their journey through life, going on the same adventures, feeling so many of the same emotions. This was a beautifully written book. I feel like it was written really tenderly and with a lot of care and a lot of respect for all of the people that were involved in this story. And I love how all these different generations of characters, their stories just kind of like were woven together in a really natural, seamless way. I enjoyed this book a lot. It is mostly correspondences, very much like the original Dracula. It's about Dracula, by the way, and then some. It's about a lot of things, but that's kind of the main thing that all of these characters have in common. The correspondence were definitely more fluffed. Like in the original Dracula, I feel like they were very much how someone would write a letter. Whereas this was more of, and then the breeze blew her hair and she caught a scent of, you know, something on the air, which I feel like that doesn't feel like it naturally belongs in a letter. You wouldn't have those elements, but it still worked because the writer was painting a picture and made it very descriptive, and you could smell things and feel things. And so I understand why she decided to go that route rather than make it more like a correspondence would actually be. Anyways, those are my thoughts. Loved it though. Very glad I read it. And then because that was a pretty dense book, I needed something really short and sweet that didn't occupy a lot of my brain space and didn't take a lot of time, quite frankly. And so I read An Elderly Lady is Up to No Good by Helen Tursten. These are a bunch of short stories, very quick and easy to get through. We have An Elderly Lady Seeks Peace at Christmas Time, and this is all about a woman that kills people. She's an 88-year-old woman that looks pretty innocent and comes off as pretty innocent, and they're kind of a matter of fact, straightforward. There's not a lot of there's really no emotional development. It's just like, this is what happened, and then she killed them, and then this is how the story resolves. They're really charming though, and they're fun little stories. And if you're looking for something that's super quick and easy to read and different, having the perspective of the murderer rather than the detective, this is a fun little book to pick up. So anyways, that's it. I'm getting really hot. It's not yet cold out for sweater weather, but I just wanted to wear a sweater because they're comfy and cozy, and I made this one. So thank you all for watching. Bye.